Necharak Rakman, the Teteramara Nukamara. Necharakmara, the Teteramara Nukamara. Necharak Moot, the Tetemut, Nuk Moot. Necharak Kanzu, the Teter Kanzu, a new Kanzu, a tapu. Peace and blessings to my sisters and brothers. This is your brother, Khepra.ptah, the ancient wisdom keeper, coming at you again. Now, we're going to talk about ancient Khemet and the planet of the apes. In this case, the kingdom of the planet of the apes. Now, I want to start off with something. I said, also known as Isis, known as Aset in the Khemetic tradition, and Isis in the Greek, says, I am yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And no man sees beyond my veil. I want to talk to you a little about ancient Khemetic tradition and dealing with the latest part of the franchise, known as the kingdom of the planet of the apes. Now, yesterday we talked about the Orishas. Now I want to talk about the metaphysics and science behind the movie. Now, we talk about the pantheon of the Orishas and how that connects the apes. I made that correlation between Obatala and the gorilla, but I want to talk about the fact that Khemet also revered apes, representing the various stages of development of humanity. And I want to make it clear, though there was no gorillas in Khemet around that time, nor was there chimpanzees, but they did have the baboon, and the baboon was sacred to Tahuti, also known as Thoth, aka Hermes Trismegistus, if you may. Now, we look at the orangutan, known as Raka. We see him being a keeper of ancient wisdom, and he acted as Tahuti, as Noah was Heru. In fact, you see much of the Asarian drama play out in the movie. Noah also played the part as Heru, avenging the murder of his father. Noah is not spelled the same as Noah in the Bible. It's spelled N-O-A. In Japanese, Noah means love. It was a love for his family that made him want to set out and rescue them. And it was also the love that of his father, causing him to take the risk to show and prove that he was worthy. In the Hawaiian language, Noah means freedom. And we see as time goes on, Noah not only set out to find his family, but like his ancestor Caesar, he too became a symbol of freedom. You look at the Tahitian language, Noah means paradise. The word paradise actually comes from a word meaning a park or an enclosure. In the early Jewish scriptures, like the Septuagint, it was used to describe the Garden of Eden. One meaning also for Eden is delight. Eden was God's paradise for Adam and Eve. In other words, the balance and harmony of the sacred masculine and feminine energies. Noah lived in the forest with his family, which had grown around the ruins of human civilization, but also had returned it to its natural state of the environment. So when we return to our original state, we are in bliss, or also paradise, in that sense of the word. Now we look at the Hebrew word for Noah, not to be mistaken with the prophet Noah, but one of the 5 daughters of a man mentioned in the Bible named Zelophehad. And Zelophehad had Noah, who also represents movement. Noah in Hebrew actually means movement. So in this case, Noah, being the protagonist, is the one who makes the journey. And when something begins on its journey, it is a form of initiation. Initiation means to begin. Noah went on his initiation journey where he meets Raka, who in this sense initiates him by teaching him about Caesar and what he stood for. So in many of today's traditions, when it deals with sacred teachings and initiatory systems, It comes with a covenant or a contract where one may promise something in order to be a part of something, such as learning about the secret oaths, the symbolic gestures and signs and symbols for the purpose of being able to identify another initiate in that particular tradition. However, there's also the belief that there is power in silence. Now, Alepus Levi, the one who gave Western occultism the picture of Baphomet, which is that horn goated being with brass, with the kundalini going up the back and the wings, he says that silence brings power to the initiate in so many ways. He gave the phrase to know, to will, to dare to be silent. This was demonstrated by the one named May, who Nova, or was called Nova by Raka. So when we examine the name Raka, we have Ra and Ka, and that is the spirit of the sun, or the spirit of light. Why? Because Raka embodied that light to Noah, getting him to think outside the box, as well as understand the original teachings of Caesar. So we would recognize the false teachings coming from the villain known as Proximus Caesar as the movie progressed. Now, in Arabic, I wanted to mention too, Noah means intent or desire. Now, this is important, family. The word desire comes from the Latin desidero, meaning to long for, to feel the want of, to miss, and even regret. But it goes further back to desidero and desidere, meaning from the stars. So in the Khemetic tradition, the soul goes through its evolution as it makes its way through the duat, which means starry place. Another word for star is asterisk. Hence, the starry place would be the astral plane. So in Western occult teachings, you have the astral body, also called the desire body. And this is the source of human emotion, energy in motion. The desire body, aka the astral body, extends 16 to 20 inches beyond the physical body. So yes, the desire body is made up of a certain substance. Now, in the Tarot system, we see that there's the high priestess, who is actually Ast or Aset, aka Isis. And when you look at her symbol and her picture, they show her in blue and white, and she's sitting with a crescent moon by her foot. She is also wearing all blue and white, blue being the color of mystery. She is holding what appears to be a scroll that says Torah, and you assume it says Torah, but it's missing the H. You can't really tell because the H is actually hidden under part of her veil, covered beneath her garment. In other words, she will only reveal so much to you. The rest you have to find in your own search. Or that knowledge is privy to you when you're ready for it. As they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So it is revealed to you when you're ready to receive such a revelation. The Tarot, also known as Rota, which is the will, also contains the word Tuara, which means all praises be to Ra. So we're looking at the fact that she represents the mysteries because women are considered to be the holders and keepers of the secrets, as well as in this case, we're looking at the fact that Noah goes to his mother for comfort, and she's also wearing that blue veil with the white stripes. And we see that she's wearing this color, but she also brings forth that assurance and that nurturing in which the mother represents. Also, this connects you to the Lukumi Yemaya, who connects to the Yoruba Yamoja, and by extension back to Isis or Aset. We also can see that the whole entire Osirian drama is played out, or part of it at least is played out in this movie, as far as the son avenging the father, because the father was killed by the enemy, who in the case Silva, who is leading the military of the one known as Proximus Caesar. In the beginning of the movie, you remember how Noah had two friends. One name was Suna, which actually means moon in a native Mexican dialect, and the other named Anaya. And you'll notice that there's a few words that sound Hebrew when it comes to the names of the various apes, right? Now, Anaya, if you notice, this is the Hebrew name. Anaya means care and protection. And it also means one without a leader. In the Old Testament, Anaya was a Hebrew priest whose name meant God answers. So Suna and Anaya were both, along with Noah, to be members of the Eagle clan. The eagle represents transcendence. In Native American tradition, eagle feathers are given to others as a sign of honor, and they are worn as symbols of dignity. Eagles also represent protection and divine guidance. As a spirit animal, it represents freedom, vision, power, and healing. In Egypt, the peregrine falcon, representing Heru, was eventually replaced with the eagle. So now on the flag, you'll see the eagle representing where the peregrine falcon once was. Now, I want to talk about the various apes in the culture of the planet of the apes, because they had a caste system. We spoke about that yesterday. Now, they had the gorillas, they had the chimpanzees, they had the bonobos, and they had the orangutan. Spiritually, gorillas are linked with leadership. Also, if you remember, the gorilla is similar in strength, right, to the leader. Also, he represents wisdom. The spiritual meaning of the gorilla deals with paying attention to the respect and perspective of others. Gorillas are also associated with powerful spirit beings, especially in African myth and legends. Spiritually, chimpanzees, okay, which is next, the chimpanzee represents exploration, self discovery, and the connection with nature, and they symbolize boundless exploration and growth. So when you see a chimpanzee in your dreams, you're being reminded to set boundaries and don't let people take advantage of you, right? And this is something that you see that Noah had to learn in the movie as well. Keep in mind, Noah was not developed the way Caesar was in the movie. Noah had to learn a lot of things. He was kind of naive, but it represents the fool in the turtle deck because he has to go on his journey. Now you have the bonobo monkey. Bonobos. I don't know if you've ever watched a documentary on bonobos and their sexuality, but bonobos are off the hook. Okay, they represent love. Now, the bonobo monkey are related to the chimpanzee. Yet chimpanzees are more aggressive, which is ironic because the villain in this particular movie, who is Proximus Caesar, was the bonobo's monkey. But you can also look at it to represent lower desire, because even though Proximus Caesar was strong, he had a selfish ambition. So the bonobos monkey, they're all about love making, which is a short contrast to the villain as described in the movies like Koba and Proximus Caesar, who was actually killers, right? And they were actually terrifying villains. They had nothing to do with love in these particular movies. But if you want to get into the spiritual meaning of these apes, then that was the breakdown. Orangutans represent the ability to move beyond drama, just like Maurice was pretty much a peaceful being in Caesar's time. He was his advisor. The orangutan is known as the person of the forest and lives in the rainforest of Asia. They like the wise men of the forest. So if you're familiar with the teachings of the Upanishads, the Vedas in India, you'll learn that it was the rishis, who were the wise men, who created the Upanishads when they had to get away from the oppression that was taking place in the cities of India. So The orangutan is like a cross between the gorilla and the chimpanzee in many ways. So when we go back to Raka, who is a chimpanzee, we see him as somewhat of a very Tahuti or Thoth-like entity who is the teacher and the keeper of the records, the keeper of the ancient wisdom and the books. So he's kind of like the Babalawo or the Kari Hell priests of Tahuti, who are the keepers of the sacred books containing the rites and ceremonies in their day. And they knew about this knowledge from long ago. Now, as far as in the movie, we look at how humans were not around to tell their side of the story. The apes began to take this information, which they could not decipher as of yet, but they believed that they were the ones who authored these books and that they were the ones who built civilization. And it also reminds us of our civilization today, the way we are trying to study ancient cultures and we have to go by National Geographic, or we have to go to some very filtered and biased forms of history who don't want to paint too far outside the lines because that can basically shape the core of conventional understanding how things are supposed to go. So when you go to school, when you learn history, you're pretty much getting the ass and elbows of history. You're not getting the whole picture. You're only getting part of the picture. See? So anyway, the apes begin to think that they were the ones who came up with that knowledge. Nonetheless, Raka, he was the keeper of the teachings of Caesar. Now, Caesar is the name of a ruler of ancient Rome. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I want to talk a little bit about that as well, as far as the difference between the ape and the human, even though we are classified in science as being related to the ape. In fact, some has gone as far as call human beings hairless apes, right? But I'm going to talk a little bit about the metaphor around that. Every individual has the ability to be either of the higher nature or dwell in what is considered our basic animalistic nature. The animal nature is the lower functions of eating, sleeping, and basically survival. But when you tap into the higher nature, you can also develop a relationship with divine forces and awaken the higher aspects of cognition. Ancient Khemet, aka Egypt, did not have gorillas per se, but they did have the baboon. The baboon is an ape. So we see where apes oftentimes were identified with wisdom and sometimes being tricksters, such as one form of Tahuti being the baboon. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos were not in ancient Kemet. Instead, you had various types of monkeys and baboons, and one of the symbols of Thoth, being a baboon, would actually be more in correspondence with Raka or a Maurice, who in the movie were the orangutans. And the orangutan is the Asiatic ape that is associated with wisdom. Now, in occult science, we talk about the various kingdoms. You have the spirituality of evolution and spiritual evolution, where at some point in time you had to evolve to the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom to become human. And the humans are considered the threshold between the animal and the higher spiritual realm. And now, this is not to mean that animals don't have a collective consciousness, as you may know of the 100 monkey story. And this was the phenomenon recorded where a monkey, right, a female monkey, had come up to the humans who were dumping potatoes. This was in Japan. They took a whole bag of potatoes and dumped them out, and they started feeding monkeys potatoes. So this female monkey picked up the potato and started washing it because she didn't like the dirt all over the potato, right? Next thing you know, the monkeys around her began to mimic her. Something interesting happened. This happened around 1950 something. On that whole entire island, monkeys started mimicking this one female and washing their own potatoes. But what's even more interesting, this phenomena took place on the surrounding islands. So what we're talking about here is a connection with the minds of the other monkeys, reaching critical mass. And this is critical mass realization among the monkeys. This also happens among humans. So, a lot of times when you believe that you have come up with an idea and somebody on the other side of the planet comes up with the same idea, that's because you both have connected and tapped into a similar frequency. A lot of times, when two different people from two different parts of the world have the similar idea, it doesn't necessarily mean one plagiarized the other. It means that they connected and tapped into a common stream of awareness. So we are actually funnels and vessels of ideas that come from the higher realm. Some will call that the Akashic realm or the Akashic field. So the more you learn, the more others are learning. We are part of a collective consciousness, communication from mind to mind. And this is why, in reality, when we're attuned, you cannot really hide things from one another if everyone was attuned, you see. In ancient Kemet, they talked about how the ancient priests would be quiet and they were silent half the time. And the other priests were communicating. That's because they were communicating with each other vibrationally. And it's said that the Aborigines of Australia still have this ability. So each and every one of us is part of a collective consciousness expressing itself through physical form, which is why you cannot do anything to another person while eventually you're catching up with you, because each and every one of us being a part of the collective, we're all part of the whole, and every part contains the whole. Now, apes can embody the spirits of the trickster. Like, for instance, we're looking at trickster deities like Eshu, like Sebek, right? And in some cases, there's what's called the Monkey King. He was like a trickster spirit in Japanese legend and lore. So it represents cleverness, though. So cleverness represents the lower aspect of awareness, as then there's the higher wisdom faculty. So cleverness deals with Sebek, right? Sebek is the crocodile. Sebek is also the jackal in one aspect. But Sebek protects the thieves from coming through the thresholds in back of Khemet, or keep the invaders out in the form of the crocodile. But he also represents the lower intellect and us dealing with cleverness and trying to scheme your way through life. But when you connect with Tahuti, right, that's the baboon, that's the ibis bird, the baboon dealing with the upper form of wisdom, the higher wisdom faculties, you find that you're guided by a higher level of consciousness and that you're connected with those higher levels of beings in the universe, as well as higher ancestral beings, would you rather call them angels and saints and so forth. Now, Noah, as before, I said before, it can be broken down in many different ways. If you notice, it's not spelled like the Hebrew prophet Noah. Okay, you see that the H is also dropped in the movie. They got it spelled Noa, and not Noah. There's also another meaning connecting with what I call, uh, you may have heard of it. It's called the Noetic plane, which is like the planetary mind. Uh, the first of the seven Hermetic principles is mentalism. And you know this mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. The first being mentalism. And the phrase that goes along with that is the all is mind and the universe is mental. AKA, you have Homo sapiens, or humans, which also mean a wise person who have the ability to either choose their lower animalistic nature and deal with the basics in life, or deal with their higher cognitive aspects so they can evolve spiritually into a being more godly and grow beyond the biosphere and into what is now called the noosphere. Hence, tap into the collective consciousness. So, when we look at the movies of what led to the downfall of humanity, it is the greediness and selfishness within humanity that leads us to self destruction, or in the more recent uh, forms of the story, it's the misunderstanding or miscalculation for being out of sync and out of harmony with nature or the divine force, in which in Kemet they knew as Netter. So therefore, what we do is we self-destruct because we perform acts in an attempt to get ahead, and we may miscalculate and miss a few steps. This is part of human evolution, but it's also something that you have to deal with your ability to reason. So even when we attempt to cure ourselves of diseases, if we're not connected with higher source, we create things like what they did, the ALZ uh, vaccine, which became a virus, which eventually came out and killed humans as humans' intellects began to decrease and they lost the power of speech. It was the apes who gained the power of speech, and therefore they began to develop reason, and therefore they were able to utilize the power of speech to manifest the world in which they wanted. So the simian plague It began to spread through humanity, killing humans and turning them into mental handicaps. It is also said that the ability to speak brings the universe into existence. In ancient religious texts throughout the world, it talks about how the Creator spoke and existence came into being. Everything came into being. Hence, you have the word universe, which is the one word, the one phrase. It also means turn into one. So, universal law and divine meaning all deals with transformation, a spiraling, a constant evolution. The universe is that which is turned into one, one turn, one phrase, one song, which bring things into being, helps to evolve, which hides the word love. We go back to the Khemetic word for love, it's mer, meaning to cultivate. So when you love something, you're cultivated. And it was just the growth of Heru under the breath of his mother Ast. It was her love that cultivated him into the warrior in which he would become. So her equivalent still lives on to this day. And this is why you see variations of the Great Mother wearing blue. Just like in the movie, you saw Noah's mother wearing blue. And he was able to take her cloth, right, her blanket, and eventually had to give it to May. Now, here's what's interesting. At the end of the movie, May too was also wearing blue, but she was wearing light blue, you see? So that had to be symbolic. It meant something. Now, she was concealing something, all right, she was concealing a gun, but there's another mystery behind that. If you notice, there's the color of the blue. They show her eyes being blue, but of course, blue represents something much deeper, not just the race of a person, but it's also dealing with the colors of mystery. So you look in India, you see Krishna and Vishnu being the color blue, right? The true sun of the sun, even though the sun may look yellow, it's also blue. Hence, Krishna is a solar deity. His skin is shown and depicted as being blue. Blue represents the heavens. It also represents mystery. It also represents the element of water. Now, Caesar in the first trilogy was named after a Roman ruler, which also is a nod to the original franchise, in which that version of Caesar started a revolution and basically declared that humanity would eventually take the place of the apes, and that the apes would be on top because humans would destroy themselves. And one of the things that has to be understood is that humanity has this self-destructive impulse. Humanity and human beings tend to have a self-loathing. And you will see that in a lot of the religions that we practice today, where we have conjured up judgmental gods. We feel that we have to punish ourselves or that God is going to punish you for doing things that are natural. So we have a lot of self loathing as a species, which could be a carryover from traumas that our species face throughout our existence on this planet, which now translates as a survival mechanism, which unfortunately has been manipulated by the elites to keep people behaving a certain way, usually in order to serve the elites, as opposed to connecting them with their higher selves and moving beyond to higher dimensions. The thing about Proximus Caesar in the movie, as he was being taught by a human who had sold out by the name of Trevathian, due to the nature of this particular person selling out and teaching Proximus Caesar about technology. The problem is that Proximus Caesar had a certain mindset, which would have done the same thing to the apes that had happened to the humans. It would have set the apes on the same destructive path. Proximus Caesar not only wants this technology for the development and advancement of his species, but he also wants to dominate and conquer, which is why when May pulls out the gun and shot one of the apes, who was one of his guards, he had no regard for the death of his fellow ape, as much as he wanted to get his hands on technology like the gun. And from his point of view, the end justifies the means, and usually it is this attitude that conquerors have for those whom they wish to conquer, but want to establish themselves as tyrannical rulers. He was the opposite of Caesar, even though his name, Proximus Caesar, means nearest to Caesar. His goals and intentions were in sharp contrast. Another thing that's interesting is that you notice that in the beginning, when Noah's village was attacked by the henchmen of Proximus Caesar, they burnt Noah's village down to the ground by fire. However, when his kingdom was destroyed, that is, when Proximus Caesar's kingdom was destroyed, it was swept away by water. Now, this is the mysteries of ancient traditions, which I'm going to talk about from, let's talk about the biblical concept, right? There are two baptisms. Your first baptism is by water, and your second baptism is by fire. They also speak about the earth being purified first with a flood by water, and the next purification would be by fire. That's the second baptism. So, the baptism by water washes away your sins and causes you to become a new being. The baptism by fire alchemically transforms you in spirit to put you in the place of spirit. Also, the mysteries of being able to go through baptism by fire when you have reached a certain trance state and you can survive the fire in a time of a world catastrophe. You'll see a lot of indigenous traditions speak about people reaching a stage of consciousness, being able to do amazing things like dip their bodies in boiling oil and even walk on lava, which is taught in certain ancient traditions. This includes African and Polynesian and native indigenous traditions and other traditions around the planet. In the Khemetic tradition, we talk about the primordial waters of nothingness, in which Ra rises as a fire and is eventually followed by Apep. Ra is the life force that we have within ourselves. It is the fire that burns the water of life. And as you breathe, you have the wind, you have the air that keeps the fire burning. You have Amen, which is the breath, and you have Ra, which is the fire that continues to burn as you breathe. You have Amen Ra, that which is hidden and at the same time revealed. You have the Amen, the hidden side of yourself, and you have the Ra, you have the fire. And yes, within each and every one of your atoms is fire. One of your atoms can be split. It has enough power, enough energy to power a city like Seattle for 6 months. We see that Noah understood the importance of the law, that is, law and order. So therefore, he grabbed, pardon me, I have a few technical difficulties here. Anyway, he grabbed 2 eggs in the beginning, and he always left one in order to keep the balance. So you have the ego, which is equivalent to the falcon. In that particular tradition, they made sure that they would continue to raise the ego, and it was the ego that represents Heru in the form of the ego, which also could be the falcon. The falcon represents Heru or Horus. And you notice that when Noah decided that he did not want to go along with the established way of thinking, he said that the law is incomplete, that the law is wrong, right? And when he put his arm out, the falcon or the hawk, or should I say the ego, landed on his arm. Now, here's the thing. If you remember watching the first part of the movie, when Noah first went to his father, right? And he tried to connect with the ego pecked him in the head, right? Now, this same ego would end up following him throughout the movie. Being pecked in the head was symbolic of Noah not having the wisdom yet. He had not gained wisdom, hence, he had been pecked in the head. Kind of like when an old man knocks his grandson upside the head with a cane to get him to think. So, as time went on, when he did gain the wisdom, he would later find out that the ego would cooperate with him and save his life. So, it is Heru who represents that which rises above. Heru means one who is above. Heru also means the face. Noah remembered the teachings of his father, and he called upon the ego by singing and chanting when he was beginning to get pummeled by Proximus Caesar. And just when it seemed like there was no hope, something wonderful happened. He began to chant, and he began to sing the song of his father. And after that, while he was laying on the ground and he's getting up and he's chanting, all the other apes joined in. And when they chanted, more and more eagles began to fly down towards Proximus Caesar, where they would eventually overcome him and overwhelm him, sending him plunging off the cliff where he fell into the waters below. Now, another thing, too, Heru represents the will. When you get into Western magic, it talks about the utilization of the will. However, in order for the will to work in a certain way, you have to utilize the imagination and also tap into the memory. So this is where Aset and Heru comes into play. You have to identify what it is that you want to achieve through Aset, and also with the imagination of Heru. And then there's the will. Heru will carry these things out automatically. The other things work as kind of like a rocket booster for where you're trying to go. The key to getting things to happen in your life is to activate your life force and fuse your intentions with your life force, aka your subconscious mind. A lot of people are autopilot, and because they're on autopilot, they have the lower animal nature that's in control, which is self-destructive, you see. Now, what's interesting is that the beast, or what we consider the beast, the apes and humans had traded places. The apes had become smarter, and humans were becoming dumber. Now, May, she was sent on a mission. She did that stoop to conquer technique and appearing weak, and also she knew the art of silence in order to get close to Raka and Caesar, whom she had been following from the beginning of the movie. By doing so, she was able to get close enough by mastering silence. In the Khemetic tradition, it teaches what the Neteru hate is too much talking. So sometimes when we're on our spiritual quest, it's good to turn off the television, family. It's good to turn off the radio. It's good to turn off your devices and sit still. Or go into nature and sit still and have some quiet time. Even in the Helios Biblios, also known as the Sun Book or the Holy Bible, in the book of Psalms, it talks about sitting still and knowing that I am God. Sitting still is that stillness. When you pray, you're speaking to the divine. When you meditate, you're listening to divine, and you're allowing yourself to be downloaded with the information. And therefore, you are connecting with that inner ruler. If we remember also that there were two other apes that assisted and accompanied Noah in the movie. Anaya also is a Hebrew word. It means another thing, and that is one without a leader. Now, he was with them. He was actually loyal, but you notice that he didn't have the thick skin that Suna had, okay? But he was still dedicated. He represented something else, though. He represented a trusted friend and a trusted sidekick. A lot of times when you have a community, there's a such thing called common unity, that is a community. So the apes were able to build a community. Caesar had created two laws that were very important. That is, they said, apes strong together. And also, he strictly had made it a forbidden thing for an ape to kill another ape. It's something that humanity can learn from. As far as our growth and our development, we understand that when there's more of us, right, working on a particular thing, we can manifest it quicker. When you get more than one person meditating and focusing on one thing, they're able to attract it and bring it forth quicker. That is called tapping into the mastermind. Each and every one of us can develop and manifest this mastermind with a collective, but also we can develop our own minds. When you sit down, when you're still, and when you go out in nature and you connect with the forces of nature, eventually you can call upon those forces of nature, and those forces of nature will respond. This is found in indigenous traditions, and mainly where I'm coming from in my school of thought, having been initiated through the Congo tradition and the European tradition. We deal with connecting with ancestral forces who are in the trees, who are in the woods, who are in the stones, who are in the mountains, who are in the rivers. You speak to the forces of nature and they'll respond, because each and every one of us are vessels of spirit, and spirit is all around us. Spirit is what we connect to. The word spirit is found, the word spiritus, which means to breathe. In the beginning of creation, it was Obatala who shaped human beings, and Olodumare transferred his breath into human beings, making human beings out of clay. And the Khemetic tradition, it shows the ram-headed Kinemu forming and shaping human beings on the potter's wheel. We are shaped by divine forces, and collectively, we are also channels of this divine force. Each and every one of us are capable of channeling the divine force. So therefore, we must ask ourselves, since science has also relegated to apes, if we are supposed to be evolved apes, then what is the next step and stage in evolution for humanity? Simple: godhood. We are here as gods in training. Even in the Holy Bible, in the book of Psalms 82, verse 6, it talks about each and every one of you are gods. And in John 14, verse 10, where Jesus also repeats that by saying that they are God to whom the scripture had come to. So, yes, you are gods in training. Each and every one of us are here to master the four elements. Where you look at that symbol of Caesar, which is that round, circular emblem with the star in the middle, representing a window that he was looking out into the street. It meant that he was looking out into the world. But if you look closely at it, it represents the four elements, and the center part being the fifth element. You are here to master the four elements: earth, wind, fire, and water, and conjoin them with ether, aka the quintessence. We're here to be masters of the elements. And therefore, by mastering the elements, you become whole. And this is when you get the 14 pieces of Osir, aka Osiris, to be brought back together. They were separated and scattered. And as these body parts of Asar, where they were scattered, each place became a shrine. It became a religion. And we became divided. But on, we allow religious concepts to divide us because of ego creeping in. And the scar, the collective scar and trauma of humanity, is the survival mechanism that has gotten out of control, causing us to only see differences when there is unity in thought. Things can manifest. And this is why you got the rascals at the top who don't want to see you getting along. They don't want to see you getting along with your family. They don't want to see you getting along with your significant other. They don't want to see you getting along because they understand that if people get along, they can manifest the mastermind, and they're no longer subjected to the false kingdom. Hence, as Proximus Caesar was trying to get the technology from long ago, you have access to that knowledge of long ago. It's called the Akashic Plane. All you have to do in order to get it is sit still and let it come to you. This is your brother, Ancient Wisdom Keeper, also known as khepra.ptah. It's great talking with your family. Thanks for listening. Uncle Chisanab Hatepu.